Hi there and welcome. Today we're talking with Angela Heise. She's a leadership and emotional productivity coach. With many years and deep experience around emotions and how they impact on our lives and where we can improve. So, welcome, Angela.
Thank you, David. Thank you. It's lovely to see you and to be here.
Yeah, thanks. I must say, it's only been quite recently that I've discovered that people such as yourself actually work and focus so much on emotions and how we can work with these, how we can learn how to better manage and improve and understand these within ourselves. So I find that quite fascinating. It's something that I think many young Australian men, which I was once, uh, we tend to shut them off. And it's only recently that we start talking a bit more about it. At least that's how I feel. So, what's been your journey that's led you into working in that emotional productivity space?
Well, like many people, I come from a family with a fairly dysfunctional, in a very dysfunctional environment. I mean, we don't really learn how to deal with emotions, and certainly the generation of my parents didn't. It was always about soldier on, push down what you don't want to feel, medicated with either drugs or with alcohol, and just get on with things. And that really didn't lead to great results. And I swore to myself I was not going to take that into the next generation, because I had traced family patterns back 4 generations, around heart disease and suicide and alcoholism and all of those things, and a commitment to having really unhappy marriages. And I said, you know what? I'm going to break that. And so I started studying emotions, and I worked on myself for a very, very long time before I actually started working with people. So that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years. I've been working with people and, passing on what I have learned, all the things that I went through, and, hopefully with the idea that what took me many years sometimes to actually understand, I can impart to people in a much more shorter time, so people can use that and turn things around really quickly. Still means you have to go through your own experiences.
Absolutely, there's a couple of points there. That soldier on, and hopefully it's not too much of a problem for people. I've been unwell this week, and when I spoke to the doctor, I ended up with I'd had a fever, and and they talked about social isolation. I had the testing, and it came back negative, but they said that that's one of the ads. And this is around the physical well-being more than anything. That one of the ads is. From one of the medical companies, I think it was Codral, had Codral Soldier On. And when I spoke to the doctor, she was saying that's that's kind of the wrong messaging. And so it sort of resonated with me just because that's a conversation I had a couple of days ago. And the other thing is starting with yourself. That I think it's too easy to play the blame game, and emotions are a hard thing that most of us. I'm not sure how well we can control them and manage them within ourselves. But I feel that we are almost equally as responsible in ourselves for that as we are for the things that are going on around us.
Yeah. Well, emotions are by nature originally unconscious, because what happens to us every time we something happens to us, we make an emotional connection, and the brain actually connects long-term memory with really strong emotions. So if something happens to us that's really impactful, the brain goes, I need to remember this. If this were to happen again, I want to know what this is so I can act really, really quickly. Because emotions are there to support us in surviving. If something is really dangerous and risky, we want to be able to react really, really quickly. And so memory helps us with that. But when we have the same emotion over and over again, it becomes hardwired. We start reacting really, really quickly. So the important thing is to know that when we start having something where we feel out of balance, and again, that might just be a nudge, just feel into that and going, what's really going on? And then when the feeling becomes conscious, that's when we have choice. And to answer your question about the self-care and and the fulfilling your needs, well, you can't pour from an empty jug. And the more you give and the less you give to yourself, the more your immune system is impacted by that. And that can have really bad consequences, as you know. And that's where colds come in, and you have a small son, right?
Yes. I have a 9-month-old. And yes, there's plenty of all sorts of different emotions, good and bad, and they do change quite fast.
Yes.
So it's
and it's probably on his well-being rather than yours at the moment, right?
Very much so. Him and my other half. And I feel that I'm looking after myself in many ways through looking after them and doing what I can for them.
I'm going to challenge you on that.
That's okay. I don't mind being challenged. That's how I've been seeing it, and I feel more comfortable and happy knowing that they're all right. And in some ways that if they're all right, I don't have the pressure on me as much to do things or to worry as much.
Okay. So. Well, when we get on planes and they do the safety announcements and all of that, and they talk about oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling.
Absolutely.
They never say put them on your child and your other half first before you put it on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. It reminds me, there's one friend I have who was in a plane crash in the ocean, and he got out. His wife was there. He got out, got some air, and went back down to help get her out. And even though he did what was natural, I think at the time, I'm not entirely sure he's quite lived it down, or whether it's the guilt or her feeling disappointed in him that he wasn't able to look after her as much first before he got that first breath, and then having gone back for her. So it just reminds me of that as well, since we're talking of planes.
Right. That's a very extreme situation. That's there are many more complex emotions involved. We were talking about self-care, and
absolutely.
And I just work with a lot of people who burn out taking care of other people, and then they wonder why that happens, and it is because we really have to take care of ourselves first.
So what are some of the ways that people really let themselves down by not looking after themselves first, especially emotionally?
Well, the consequences of not letting yourself down are generally the ones where often people push down the emotions. And again, I'm not talking about you here right now, but often what happens is people go, I have to take care of other things. I have to make sure that everyone around me is okay. I have to be sure that I'm fine. And I call that fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable. I'm fine, just don't talk to me. And what happens is we have what I call an internal toxin vat. And so anytime something doesn't work for us, we take that emotion, that frustration, that anger, that sadness, whatever it may be, we put it into the toxin vat, and the toxin vat grows and accumulates more and more toxins until we get to a situation where it just explodes. Mm-hmm. Nobody has ever said, I started feeling so frustrated that my toxicity just gently flowed over the edges of the vat. No, it doesn't. It explodes. And then people make some choices around how they behave. They yell at somebody. They start fights where there really doesn't need to be a fight. They blow things up. They start medicating, again, self-medicating by drinking, or, you can turn anything into an activity that takes you out of feeling what you don't want to feel. So we can let ourselves down in so many different ways.
I think that's where all the value really is. So often we do bottle it up or put it in that toxic bag, as you say, and for us within our families, our relationships, just how we deal with our friends, our neighbours, a lot of it comes down to other things. It's other emotions and what we have bottled up that comes out and impacts on many different aspects of our lives. That's what I'm thinking, and I think really one of the reasons why I invited you and really hope to talk with you like this and put it out there for people to understand that a lot of our relationships and the problems we face, that there's things that have happened before it, and there's things that have led to that, and it's not simply that issue. It's like relationships. When a relationship ends, and people think, oh, it was this argument or this incident, and that's almost just a catalyst or the pop, the bag that didn't gently overflow. It broke.
Yes, which is why it's so important that we learn to express our emotions. I mean, simply by labeling an emotion, when you feel into it and you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. That already gives you much more choice about what you want to do with it. You know, it's like instead of acting through the emotion and just lashing out or, you know, yelling at somebody or sending an email that 5 minutes later you go, oh, I wish I hadn't sent that, whatever it may be. But being aware of it and just expressing it, there's a really big difference between blowing up and getting really angry by, you know, like venting the anger and saying, you know what, I am so angry right now. I really don't know how to express that. I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to reset myself and then I'll come back and let's have a chat then.
I think that's really important to find out what are some of those little skills, the little mechanisms you can do, whether it's go for a walk or other things. And they might be, I take it they can be different for each of us, what works best.
Yes. I generally recommend that, again, if you're somebody who bottles things up, learning to talk about emotions is probably a really useful skill to get. Again, by saying, you know, just because I'm aware of my emotions now, I don't need to do anything with that. Especially men, you know, just saying, I know exactly, I know I'm frustrated, I know I'm angry, but I don't need to do anything about it. It's not a really useful choice. I mean, for men, generally in Australia, there are several men every day kill themselves because they really don't know what to do with their emotions and their depression and their loneliness and all of those emotions. I don't hold me to it, but I think it's 7 men a day.
I think it is, but that's what's reported, and as I understand, it might be as many as 15 a day, which is it's considerable, and that's why it's in conversations like this are just so important. As you mentioned, having a label, one, understanding, recognizing our emotions, being able to label it, to talk about it. And I've seen on your website, and I'll put your website up because there's a lot of information on there and tools there. But I can't think how many emotions that you listed there. It was like 52, one for each week of the year. It's but there were more.
52. There are many, many more. But I decided to do this year. I'm focusing on one emotion a week. So I'm doing a lot of posts on social media, and I'm doing an article once a week that just explains what the upside and the downsides of this emotion are when you're managing and when you're not managing it. Yes.
There. I think it's so important I've got a lot of learning because I wouldn't be able to say 52 off the top of my head, I don't think. Although I'll feel them, and I think that's the key to it. We feel all of these in different levels, not just anger, sad, happy. There's so much more in the detail. And
we often talk to people and they don't really want to know how we feel. So we learn to actually stop saying it. I mean, what do we say to somebody? How are you? We don't expect them to tell us how we feel and how they feel. We just, I mean, I have seen this so many times, you know, at the supermarket before the self-checkouts, talking to, you know, when the supermarket checkout person says, hi, how are you? You know, and I haven't even answered yet. And they go, okay, yeah, me too. Or that's great. Or whatever it is. It's just a throwaway line. But when you think about it and when you go, so how am I really feeling? And you're taking that as an opportunity, it can be a really useful thing to do. And again, in Australia, it's often a throwaway line, but in other countries, it's not. I mean, I know in Europe, when somebody says, how are you? And you come back with, I'm feeling really sad right now. It's actually, it's a relevant answer. It's a legit response. You know, and it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to fix somebody, you know, because, you know, and that's what people are often afraid of. If I say, oh, David, I'm feeling so sad right now, people often go, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Now it's my responsible to fix that. And it really isn't. The only thing that really helps at that point is really saying, that sounds really tough, you know. And again, and if as soon as you say, is there anything I can do for you? I will say, just listening would probably be great. Right?
I think, that's a skill that most of us could probably be a little better at, even as good as some are. That listening and, as you touched on, then empathy, which which I've discussed before with Leanne Butterworth here, and I think that's both the listening and the empathy are just wonderful skills to have and to build on.
Yeah.
So, and
because it validates our emotions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the important thing as well. When we talk about these and sadness or anger or whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you're expecting a fix or a solution.
No.
It's letting people know, and those throwaway lines, how are you? I'm one of the ones that usually I'll have a little think, and I say how I think I'm feeling or things like that. If I'm unwell, I say it. Sometimes I don't think they want the answer.
Yeah. But you know what? Again, there's one sentence structure. If I could eliminate that from language, I would do that in a heartbeat. You make me feel. Because nobody can make us feel anything. If I say to you, I'm really angry right now, you're not making me angry. It's my feeling. I am making myself feel angry. So if I say to you, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling low, you're not making me feel that either. And it's not your responsibility to fix that. Mm-hmm. So it's just saying, what would really help me is for you to listen to me. And again, it's expressing what we really want. And we often don't do that. We expect that other people mind read how we feel. And then then again, it's that whole responsibility thing. You should know what to do. So it's fairly mixed up around, what is a useful way to deal with emotion and what isn't. Again, we don't learn that.
No, it's kind of interesting. The older I get, the more I realize I haven't learnt some really important skills back in school. They're only what you learn through life, and some of them, like the emotions and empathy and listening, are things that should probably be touched on a lot earlier.
Absolutely. This is why I developed a program that has all the skills in there that I thought I would have loved to learn as a child. The empathy skills, the listening skills, the ability to manage attention, all of those things that don't seem to be part of emotional intelligence, but really are.
Mm-hmm. There are. I think it's important. I put your website up again because there are some free tools on there, some things that people can learn and just start to get some understanding, because I know that if we change our mindset around emotion, we can be much happier. And even though that's an emotion, it's about the management of it. And it's funny that I say that because I'm going to bring up soon. I did a little earlier. You've got a questionnaire, a survey on the emotions, and I think if this was university, I failed in everything except for a very low pass in one. So let's show this. So there. Do you mind explaining a little bit about what this might show and how this works around the emotion and productivity?
So these are what I call the 11 practices of emotional productivity. And they are around recognizing your emotions, because that's at the basis of everything. If you don't know how you feel, you can't really manage your emotions. Then care is all about self-care, and that's your physical needs, which is at the basis of everything, plus some others. Fulfill is, how do you fulfill your needs? How do you take care of your learning needs, your physical needs, whatever they may be, your relationship needs. Maintaining is about maintaining boundaries. How can you say yes? How can you say no to things? Are you a pushover? Do you always say, yeah, sure, I can do this, and then end up being really, really resentful? Are you able to focus your attention? Because we are so overwhelmed these days, and multitasking is something that we really don't do very well at all. And there is connection. And that's about connecting with empathy, because we have two ways of connecting with people. One is through task focus, let's just get this done. And the other one is relationship building. And we're often very good at task focus. So it's about, it's very functional. We're just here to get some things organized, some things done. But it's the empathy, that trust that we're building that can often be missing. Shift is about shifting your perception. Perception is a really interesting thing, because it can shift on a dime, literally, because we're very good at taking a summary description of something because we focus on what's really important and then we draw conclusions. And depending on how we're feeling at that time, whether we're in a resourceful or in an unresourceful state, we can take information and completely get it down, get it in the wrong way. So we perceive somebody or a situation in a way where we get really upset about it. When we change our mind and we change our perception, we go, I don't know why I got upset about that. So it's the ability to actually recognize what gets us to jump so quickly to conclusions, and then being able to, in the last one, to reset that, and being able to saying, okay, I can shift my mindset. I can really go into a different. I can shift my emotion and become more flexible in how I deal with situations. And the next one, clarify, is about how willing am I to have the conversation, the clarifying conversation. So people call that conflict resolution, which I really personally don't like as an expression, because conflict is conflict, and in its definition, it's pretty much unsolvable. But a constructive discussion is a really useful thing to have. So if I said to you, David, would you like to have a constructive discussion? You're much more likely to say, sure. But if I said, we've got some conflict, can we resolve that? So these are the conversations that actually create a relationship. They are the ones that build the trust. It's when we don't have them, that's what destroys them. And then celebrating, it's doing yay and going, yes, this worked. Our brain is focused on negativity because that has helped us survive in the past, when we watched out for the saber-toothed tiger or for the other guy with a club, who was about to hit us over the head. But we don't really, so we're focusing much more on what could go wrong than what goes right. So by celebrating, we're actually activating some really important pathways in our brain that are not there just only to connect us with people. They also help us prove ourselves health-wise. So that's why, this is the essence of 25 years of work and 40 years of self-development.
Mm-hmm. And certainly when I was answering it, I'm thinking that sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling at the time or how I'm seeing things, that if I answer it tomorrow, I might get slightly different results.
Probably, yeah. But overall, you will still stay in the same. I mean, you're probably at the moment you're managing yourself. You probably will still go in and out of emotions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
absolutely. I find for me with my emotions for a while now, even before I had my son, the extreme, the heavy emotions like anger or frustration or sadness, they don't last very long. I seem to be able to get on top of them easily or move past them. I'm not sure where I've gained that from. I think just things I've been through in the past. But when you're
this is not a coaching session, otherwise I'd say let's have a look at how whether you're pushing them down or whether you're actually expressing them.
Yeah, I don't know, but that'll be another one. I wanted to bring that up just to give people some more insight into how deep, and that's taken it a lot further than I even thought, how deep this area is. We talk about one topic that I hear on the television almost daily or in the newspapers is around domestic violence, and that's such a serious area and such a problem. But when we talk about emotions like this, I can't help but think it's the let me think of the right words. It's almost an outcome of the emotions, the domestic violence. It's not that the domestic violence itself is in someone's nature necessarily, that they're born, that they're going to do these things. But there's that build up, whether it's that toxic bag or bottling it up or other things where we're looking at it like this. I think there's so much value in there for us as society if we give more attention to this area.
Absolutely. And I can, again, this is my background as well. I grew up with a lot of men who did not know how to manage their emotions, who would throw things, who would start yelling, screaming. They rarely got physically abusive, but there was a lot of mental, and emotional stress. And again, it felt very unsafe to be around them because, I personally never knew whether that throwing thing would end up being, being sent to my room was the safest option. I actually welcomed that. But whether it would end up being slapped in the face or, again, the emotional, the putting down, all of these things that came with that. And it was always completely unpredictable. And it was that toxin vat that grew, and I could feel it, I could see it build up, and then I could see the signs. I knew when there were certain signs, I would literally, that's when I would take myself to my room by myself, so I would not be in the room when that happened. And, that's when you start walking on tiptoes and all of that. And so again, when we teach men specifically to recognize what's going on and share those emotions and saying, I'm really depressed right now. I really don't cope. And especially at the moment, there are so many challenges. It is so important to share that and say, I'm not coping. But as long as men think it's a weakness to share emotions of that sort, it's a problem.
It's interesting that you say that. One thing that I learned as a teenager, I was doing martial arts, was through the self-discipline, and I suppose almost an emotional aspect is it's not a lack of courage for walking away from a fight.
No.
Like that. And it's, whether we're talking about violence, domestic violence, things on the street, emotional abuse, and certainly we shouldn't have any tolerance for it. But I think it's so much better to aim at solving or addressing the root of the problem, not the effect of it, the outcome of it.
Yeah. And I think we're getting better, but it's a long road, unfortunately, because as long as we're still making fun of people who share their emotions, as long as we still say they're dramatizing or, they're hysterical. I mean, that goes for women when they express their emotions, or, the strong silent type still gets the, yay, look at him, how he manages all of this. I think we can do better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to take a long, long time to break out of. But a start is the conversation. So I think it's actually an ask from myself to everyone watching, when you feel like you're walking on eggshells, when you feel like others are bottling it up, and you can see it, as Angela said here, you can see it getting bigger and bigger, and that toxin bag filling up. Almost maybe would you suggest try to open the conversation about emotion? Or
I would probably suggest that when you feel that somebody is in that situation, when you feel that they're about to explode, that's not the time to have the conversation, because chances are that then you become the object of that rage, that unprocessed anger. I would always invite you to, if you're feeling unsafe, move away. Or if somebody has an issue, remove yourself from the situation and come back when it's gone down, when the person is in a calmer state. You don't know whether it's going to bring up that toxicity immediately, but you can say, look, when we had that situation yesterday, could we talk about that? If the person gets upset immediately and says, I don't know what you want to talk about, there's nothing to talk about, then it's definitely not the time to talk about it. Because when we get into this space, we're not operating with a full brain. Our logical capacity, our ability to think and make logical and rational decisions has gone offline. We are literally operating from a fight-flight brain. And you don't really want to be with somebody when they're in that place. You don't know what's going to happen. So make sure that you're both in a place where you can talk about it rationally. And if it doesn't look like it, walk away. Just announce that you're going to walk away. Don't just turn around and walk.
Certainly, it's different, I suppose, with different situations where there can be abuse or violence or those things. But when you're talking, say, between mates or friends or others that you might be able to talk to in a safer environment, that you have a little bit more distance in that relationship rather than as partners or a spouse, that might be a little bit different, at least to open up a conversation, or not necessarily about them, but I think each of us could probably start sharing about ourselves a bit and be a little bit more vulnerable. That can make it easier for others to also be vulnerable and to talk about themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think the situation I was describing was when let's say you and I have a fight with each other. That's not the time to say, let's have a talk about how we talk about this. But if you're talking, if you have a mate and you see that they're starting to bottle things up, it's not a critical situation. It's just something you're observing from the side. Absolutely have that conversation. I mean, and it's so important to say, you know, like, I'm here, talk to me. What's going on? And then stop and just wait. And if they say, well, let's go and have a beer instead, I'll probably say, well, let's not. Let's talk.
Yeah, I think things like the drinking, as you said, it depends how it's done. And that's what makes this such a complex topic, that there's no absolute, or in many areas, there's no absolute black and white, right or wrong, certainly in how it's dealt with. But
if I could write a manual that says, in this situation, when this happens, do that, followed by this, followed by that, God, would life be easy. But
I think the manual would have many volumes and take up more than what's on those shelves behind you. Yeah, it's so from what I'm thinking or feeling about this sort of topic is a couple of things to do. Is one, we can all start talking about it a bit more and talking about ourselves and understanding how to talk about our emotions, what our emotions are and what we're feeling. And the second thing is to actually arm ourselves with information, knowledge and learning through people such as Angela and what she offers on her website. But what are the other things that you might add that can help us, just any little bits of gold that can help us lead happier and more emotionally productive lives?
You want a really, really, really basic tool?
Really basic.
Breathe. When we get upset, when we get stressed out, we stop breathing. And just stopping and taking a deep breath and actually a few more really makes a difference to how we feel. I mean, when we get really stressed out, again, what happens is the body redirects the blood into the arms and the legs. So we can't really think when we are in that space. So by taking deep breaths, we're oxygenating the brain. And all of a sudden, we can actually feel different emotions. We're not in fight, flight. We're not fighting for our survival. And that really creates a much happier life. And again, celebrate, you know, like raising your arms like this and going, is the winner pose, creates dopamine in your brain, which is the reward chemical, which helps us to feel really good about what we're doing. So if you go around and just go, have a reason, don't just randomly raise your arms, but feel good about what you're doing, you're creating a biology that's much more useful for being happy.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think you mentioned it before on the, I know that you mentioned it sometime before, gratitude.
Yes,
and there's, I'm not sure if you're aware, there's a fellow, Matt Boyce, from the Human Connection Project. So his is about connection more than anything. And he talks a lot about the suicide and depression and different things, but just establishing connection. And as he said, as he would say and says all the time, how good's living? Yes. I think just that bit of gratitude. Yes. But I'll put up the website. Everyone really jump on there, have a look. There's some free tools. There's some really awesome training. And I know that if you saw my scores earlier, I know I could do with and benefit from. And have a go at that questionnaire and see what you might learn about yourself and the areas that we can improve, because we all can improve.
Yes, we all can. I mean, we're all work in progress. Everybody is. Yeah.
I think that's great, and I think a few bits there people can understand. And thank you, Angela, today for starting the conversation on emotion.
Thank you, David. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks.